They never taught you this in school. They never told you that behind the quiet pages of history books, families were treated like property, bodies catalogued for profit. Men and women were forced into unions, not for love, but to produce more slaves. Children were torn from their mothers, fathers watched powerless, and every life was measured in numbers. The word human barely applied. This was deliberate. This was cruelty engineered to strip away identity, to control, to dehumanize. I'm Simmons, and welcome to Chronicles of Black. Before we continue, hit subscribe and leave a comment because this is a story schools failed to teach. And it's time the truth came out. Imagine waking up each day knowing your body, your choices, your very life belonged to someone else. The whip was constant, overseers were merciless, and fear hung in the air like smoke you couldn't escape. One wrong word, one hesitation, and punishment followed. Men labored from sunup to sundown, often in chains, knowing resistance could cost them their lives. Women carried impossible burdens, forced to work the fields while also caring for children under constant threat of separation. The cruelty was methodical. Families were torn apart, children sold, and love criminalized. And still, they endured. Even in the shadow of terror, resilience thrived. Mothers whispered songs to their children, not just to soothe, but to teach lessons, to pass down memory, to hold on to a sense of self that slavery tried to erase. Fathers shared stories of courage and history, teaching their sons and daughters wisdom that the oppressors wanted obliterated. Every quiet act, every secret lesson, was defiance. Every glance, every hidden gesture, became lifelines. Chains could bind their bodies, but they could not touch their hearts, and the trauma didn't end there. Slavery left deep, invisible scars, passed down from one generation to the next. Even after emancipation, families faced a world still built to keep them beneath. Segregation, discrimination, and systemic exclusion replaced chains. Opportunities were denied, schools were closed, neighborhoods were segregated, and every success was met with suspicion or hostility. Parents who had survived unimaginable cruelty feared for their children. Communities struggled to reclaim dignity, while carrying the weight of history on their shoulders. Yet even in the darkest circumstances, hope persisted. Quiet acts of courage flickered like fragile flames. Secret schools taught children to read and write, even when it was forbidden. Communities protected one another. Stories were whispered, songs carried coded messages, and knowledge passed from generation to generation. These were acts of survival, acts of rebellion, acts of humanity. They were ways of saying, we are still here, we refuse to disappear. And triumph came, though not without struggle. Descendants of enslaved people transformed suffering into determination. They became leaders, educators, artists, activists, lawyers, and innovators. They reclaimed heritage, fought for civil rights, and refused to let history silence them. Every achievement, every voice raised for justice, every step forward was a quiet victory over a system designed to erase them. The fight for equality was relentless, but dignity endured. Even today, the legacy of those who survived slavery continues. Quiet resilience, courage in the face of oppression, and unbroken spirit laid the foundation for future generations. It reminds us that the human spirit can endure unimaginable pain, that hope, even fragile, can ignite change, that love, education, and culture can survive when the world tries to destroy them. The horror of slave breeding itself is hard to imagine. Families torn apart, children sold, women forced into pregnancies for profit. This was not random. It was deliberate, systematic, and calculated. Men and women had no control over their bodies, no protection for their children, and no rights recognized by law. The records are chilling: ages, genders, reproductive history numbers instead of names. Behind every number was a life, a story, a family fractured. Mothers cried in silence. Fathers held their fists behind fences. Every act was a reminder. You are property, not human. And yet, humanity survived. Even under constant fear, even in unbearable cruelty, people found ways to connect, to resist, to survive. Every whispered lesson, every stolen loaf of bread, every secret prayer was defiance. It was proof that the human spirit cannot be erased. Families formed bonds that no overseer could sever. Neighbors protected one another. Children learned what they could. Parents preserved history in secret. Even the smallest victories mattered because they were life, love, and hope. The psychological toll was immense. Generational trauma became reality. A mother who had lost her own mother feared for her children. A father who had been denied protection carried fear and caution into every relationship. The horrors endured became woven into daily life, influencing choices, relationships, and opportunities. Yet, within this trauma, courage persisted. Communities nurtured hope. Education, culture, and faith became acts of survival. And every act of resilience was a quiet rebellion. Triumph came in moments large and small. Descendants of enslaved people became changed. They fought for education, for civil rights, for equality, and for the right to exist fully as humans. Every achievement, every story shared, every truth told, is a victory over a system that once tried to erase them. Justice may have been delayed, but dignity could never be taken. Even survival itself became an act of defiance. Today, we honor that spirit. It is alive in families who celebrate heritage, in communities that preserve memory, in leaders and educators who continue to fight injustice. Every whispered story, every song, every act of courage carries the legacy of those who endured. It reminds us that oppression can never fully erase human spirit, that hope survives, that dignity persists, and that triumph is possible even after unimaginable suffering. So when you hear the word slave, remember it is not just history, it is a warning, a lesson, and a call to honor those who endured. They survived, they thrived, they reclaimed their humanity. Their spirit, unbroken and alive, carries us forward. This is the story of slave breeding, of resilience, of trauma, and of triumph. Schools failed to teach it, but now we remember, we speak, we honor, and we ensure the courage and dignity of those who endured will never be forgotten.